Hello there. Welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. Today's episode is all about Hawthorne Horticulture and an interesting, mysterious development in this interesting story about American hydroponics and business. So if you don't know Hawthorne Horticulture, they are a famous, almost infamous company that was set up by Scotts Miracle-Gro. So they're one of the biggest fertilizer and pesticide companies in the world. And they focus on home and lawn fertilizers and pesticides. And they're massive. They're based in Ohio and they're owned by a family. Well, they're a publicly traded company, but they're owned by, let me just get the name of the Hagedorn family. And they set up around about 15 years ago a subsidiary to focus on legal cannabis and hemp growing. So the Hagedorns it's a German surname, as lots of people in Ohio are from German descent, the Hagedorns, and Hagedorn actually means hawthorn in German, so they translated it to Hawthorne Horticulture, so it's still connected to Scotts in some way, but it was separate because they realized that their investors on Wall Street would get jittery if Scotts Miracle-Gro started pushing hard into cannabis. And they used their weight and their massive purchasing power to quickly purchase companies that were already established in the cannabis sector, the legal cannabis sector. And so they could buy into ready-made sales into a booming market, and this increased their revenue and their growth, more importantly, their growth figures. So they invested a lot of money, and this was the strategy. Acquisitions were the strategy. Growth via acquisitions was the strategy, and it seemed to be working very well, especially during lockdown, where they looked like miracle workers, where this was booming. States were legalizing at a rapid rate and people had time on their hands. And so hydroponics was booming and Hawthorne Horticulture was booming. However, it wasn't without naysayers in the legal cannabis sector. There was lots of controversy because Scotts are famous for selling Roundup, which is glyphosate, and glyphosate has been linked to a number of cancers. And so Monsanto, obviously GM crops as well, they're famous for when they make Roundup. And so, and then there was a rumor that Hawthorne and Scotts was owned by Monsanto. And this is not true. There's no information out there on the web that says that they're owned. They simply just sell what was Monsanto products. Monsanto have now themselves been bought out by, is it Bayer? Yes, it was Bayer, and rather stupid acquisition because Monsanto, a lot of dirt comes with Monsanto, and so and a lot of legal claims and things like this. So you really are buying a big sack of crap when you buy Monsanto. I don't know what they were thinking, but yeah. So then Scotts, they purchase and they sell a lot of those products for use in home and gardens, and so many in the cannabis sector didn't like that. There's a lot of false rumors about Scotts as well. For me, it's not the links to Roundup. I think probably the worst product that there's two products I think that Scotts are terrible at selling. One is controlled release fertilizers. These are the plastic little balls that just sit around in your soil for decades, never decompose, or take centuries to decompose. And the other one is ready-to-use fertilizer, diluted fertilizer that just waste plastic packaging. So it'd be great if Scotts could stop selling those ridiculously bad for the environment products. I would say they're more important to get rid of than glyphosate in its immediate effect. However, back to the subject in hand, Hawthorne Horticulture, they bought some really big established brands, and that caused waves in the legal cannabis sector. These brands were, Gavita was a massive lighting brand, and can filters you will have heard of. Botanicare, but probably the biggest is General Hydroponics, famous for their 3-part fertilizer. Really big range of products you can apply if you use General Hydroponics. Really established, lots of old cannabis from back in the days when it wasn't legal. People worked for them, so they were really buying into the community, as it were. They're trying to buy kudos. Vermicrop Organics, Hurricane, Titan Controls, Mother Earth. These are all brands that were purchased by Hawthorne and part of their lineup. Gavita since stopped selling in Europe, and I know Hawthorne at one point after lockdown, where everything started to shrink again, they just they didn't sell off their lights cheaply. They just disposed of them, and an extremely high amount of lights with an extremely high street value for LED lights, and that was a real shame. And yeah, it'd be interesting to know how they were disposed of. So that was interesting. The Gavita was a massive brand here in the UK as well. Botanicare and General Hydroponics, not so much. And Botanicare, they tried to launch, I think, through Hydrogarden here in the UK. Botanicare have got some really good products. And I was just surprised at the lineup they chose to launch here in the UK. They tended to launch like the products that were like flavour products. And I would have chosen other products in the Botanicare range that were unique, but that's a matter for a different day. General Hydroponics have since, I think their European arm has changed name as well. But Hawthorne Horticulture continues on and did continue on. They bought some retail or distribution companies as well, so sort of control more of the supply chain to get a tighter grip on that. And the family that runs the Hawthorne were very aggressive in their strategy, the Hagedorns. And so that was this strategy, trying to get into large big box stores as well, things like Home Depot, where they'd already got established distribution through the Miracle-Gro and Scotts range. But here comes the really interesting bit, because it's the strange, curious case of Hawthorne, because after COVID and lockdown, there was obviously a massive slump in hydroponics. Now, what do you do if you're a large company like Scotts Miracle-Gro and Hawthorne? They've got the money to weather the storm, but it's affecting your balance sheet, it's affecting your growth figures, and your investors are not happy. They can't see federal legalization of cannabis anytime soon. And so if they're even though they're pressing and lobbying Donald Trump and the Democrats as well at the same time to legalize it on a federal level, they're not being very successful. Donald Trump's got other fish to fry. And so what they've decided to do is push off Hawthorne Horticulture off their balance sheets, so they've got nothing to do with it. And so they've tried to, what they've done though is what's curious. So if you look at it, they've not sold it. They've put it in the hands of an independent strategic partner. They've transferred the cannabis-focused subsidiary away from Scotts Miracle-Gro. Not sold it. Nowhere does it say it's been sold, but they're looking to sell it. But the problem is, there's no information about who's going to be buying it, but they are said that they're going to sell it. But a company of Hawthorne size is probably have to be bought by another publicly traded company. And if a publicly traded company is going to buy Hawthorne Horticulture or Hawthorne Collective, as it's now known, then it would need to be declared to the stock market, and it would need to be public knowledge. So who is purchasing Hawthorne Collective? Who is running Hawthorne Horticulture? One of the biggest brands in hydroponics. Nobody knows who is running it. And that, I think, is really, really interesting. And I think some journalists should have a look into it, because there's no information out there about who runs Hawthorne Horticulture. Who is at the wheel of Gavita, General Hydroponics, Botanicare, can filters, things like that. So there's a conundrum for you, a really interesting, juicy story that should run and run. So we've already had the issue of where the Hawthorne lights were being sued. The Osram people were suing the people using the Hawthorne lights, potential users, and threatening to take growers to court. And this is another spicy aspect of that whole story, and it sort of interplays with it. The Venn diagram overlaps. Will farmers be sued for using Gavita lights, and who the hell runs Hawthorne Horticulture? Thank you very much for listening. Some of that was pure drivel, but if you did find it useful or interesting, could you do me a massive, massive, massive favor and leave a review specifically on Apple Podcasts, even if you're not using Apple Podcast, because I'm trying to get up the charts and trying to get a hydroponics podcast in the top 10 for home and garden. I think that would be a really big achievement, especially during the summer. And also, I've put ourselves forward for a gardening media Guild award for Podcast of the Year. And I think being up the chart will give us a good chance of winning that. So, be able to go to London and wear a tuxedo and collect an award if you can do that. So that would be really interesting. So get onto Apple Podcasts, click follow on Apple Podcasts and leave a 5-star written review or a 4-star or whatever you want to leave. But that will shoot us up the Apple podcast charts, which will be fantastic. I've got some really interesting podcast episodes lined up for Monday and Tuesday this week. Don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. But I'll bring my A grade Monday and Tuesday, because I've got to do some videos as well on YouTube. One of them is going to be on all about growing crops on Mars. And the other one's going to be on use of vibration plates, which I think should be interesting. Okay, until then, thank you very much for listening and goodbye.